what exactly is A Victim Bites Back? Well, I started it over a year ago as a travel series looking at all the places I visit, also covering music, movies, films, politics and what's going on in the world around us. We're now up to show number 67 and I intend to keep going as long as you intend to keep watching it. Meanwhile, this is our theme, A Victim Bites Back, otherwise known as I'll Slap Your Face. Welcome to A Victim Bites Back, show 67. And one thing I haven't mentioned is that all these Victim Bites Back shows are done by one person, me, with my iPhone and my facilities, Final Cut Pro on my laptop and everything else. And essentially, it is just me. This is done by me, as you can see by the amateur level of filming. A point I wanted to make, you can now make totally proficient, perhaps not excellent, perhaps not brilliantly done, filmed, sound-wise, edited, special effects and everything else, but you can make a show entirely on your own. Well, we've now made 67 of these, A Victim Bites Back, and indeed I'm hoping that one of the larger transmission sites, be they Netflix or Hulu or whatever they are, might actually pick them all up, because it could be of great interest to a lot of people, even if just for historical detail. And what I'm going to do in this edition of A Victim Bites Back mainly is look at NOTPO, not only the post office. I mentioned a couple of shows ago that when I watched Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, what impressed me was when he decided to hold a gathering, a meeting of a dozen or so people, all of whom have been treated in the same way by the Post Office, to get together and start getting people to look again at what was going on. Well, that started the whole ball rolling in the Post Office scandal. But far, far worse than the post office scandal has been the false allegations industry, where people have deliberately lied or made things up or even just exaggerated encounters in order to make large sums of money, often encouraged by bent lawyers who say, oh, you only need to say this and they'll never find out that that's a lie or whatever. Sometimes encouraged by helpful police officers. We believe you. Anything you say is fair enough. Now tell us more about your encounters with Jimmy Savile when he raped you in a car park outside a hospital. That sort of thing has completely lost control now. You can see it ranging from things like Prince Andrew being sued by that bint in America and settling for millions of pounds because the law basically supports the false accusers. And it's not just false accusers. There's people in prison for murder who didn't do the murder and just didn't have the facilities to prove their innocence. Not, of course, that they should have to. Technically, the law says you are innocent until or unless you are proven guilty. But times have changed, especially now the media coverage is the number one thing. And if the media covers you and basically assumes and says you're guilty, you're guilty, whatever law courts may decide. Someone's got to do something to change this situation of justice in the United Kingdom. Actually, it's a global problem, but we're in the United Kingdom, so let's try and get things sorted here. And that's when I thought, watching the programme, do you know what? We ought to have a gathering of a lot of people who've been affected by the legal judicial system breaking down, making short statements about how it ruined them and their families and their friends and their careers and everything else, but also what we can do about it. And that is the point of this show.
Baby, I'm through running, it's true. I'd be a fool to try to escape you. Maybe I'm beat, but oh, what a sweet surrender. You keep your rights, I'll take your nights. No one can lose when we turn the lights out. Tasting defeat, loving that sweet surrender. I'm giving up myself to you, but I didn't really lose at all. I gave the only love I knew, but it never hurt me to fall. Now that it's done, so glad you won. I know our lives have only begun, hon. No more retreat, only my sweet surrender. Yeah. Well, honey, I may be beat. Oh, what a sweet surrender.
Had experience with the parole people, and I have to say mine 23 years ago was absolutely fine, or 20 years ago. I was given first parole, which was unheard of back in 2005 if you hadn't done all the courses and admitted guilt. Of course, I was not guilty of the conviction, so I wouldn't admit guilt. And I did not, therefore, do any courses, but they still granted me first parole. I think that one of the reasons was that they discussed me with all the officers and governors of the prisons I was in, and virtually everyone said they were convinced I was innocent of the crimes that I was convicted of, which I was. But as a result, I was given first parole, and I came out after serving 3.5 years of my 7-year sentence. When I came out, I had to check in, I think, once a week with the local central parole office just to make sure that I was obeying all the rules and all the rest of it for a couple of months before it became monthly and then annually and then expired. And I went for a couple of those meetings, and after one of them, there was a post that appeared on the online forum of one Alan McGee. Now, you probably never heard of Alan McGee. Why would you have? He was one of the people behind the group Oasis back in the 90s. In fact, that was really his only claim to success. And he started a blog or whatever online, a Scottish gentleman with ginger hair, when he had hair. And he was very anti-me for all the usual reasons, and ranted on about what a vile human being I was, let alone a vile pervert. And on his regular blog appeared this post by somebody who said they'd bumped into me or seen me passing in the street in London, and I was happy and cheerful and obviously had no remorse or regrets at all, and all the rest of it. Anyway, I put two and two together and worked out that this post had come from somebody who was also in the parole office waiting to see their parole officer when I was there one week. And they'd actually constructed this post to go on the Alan McGee blog. And I worked out exactly who it was, contacted my parole office, and as a result, the post was taken down. Alan McGee was rather red-faced and ashamed about having put it up in the first place, and the man who put the post on disappeared back to prison to serve the rest of his 10-year sentence for raping children or mugging old ladies or whatever it was he was in prison for. So in the end, karma kicked in. It does have a habit of doing that. There are two big problems with the post office scandal and the drama that has grown up thanks to the ITV special starring Toby Jones, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. One is fairly well discussed, and that is the CCRC, the Criminal Case Review Commission. Now, this is the commission that is meant to look at any possible miscarriages of justice, and if they consider that they are worth overturning, sending them back to the Court of Appeal. Well, that's fine in principle and ought to be happening. It ought to be happening to many of the cases that are applied to it, because an awful lot of people do apply, although the vast majority simply can't afford to do so or don't have the energy to do so or the funds. But the CCRC rejects 98% of applications. Now, this means that the judicial system gets it right 98% of the time, and people who are in jail are legitimately in jail, having broken the law in every way that the courts have decided. But we know that is not the case in many, many cases. And if you look at the post office scandal, you see that even the CCRC, when pushed and given the solid evidence of the Horizon failure and so on, agreed to send back 30 to 40%. I think 93 of the 800 applications have been sent back and granted. Now, the government is now saying all 800 should be quashed, which I think is ridiculous, going to the other extreme. But even so, just assuming that, say, 7 out of 8 should be quashed, that means the CCRC is ridiculously slow and wrong in sending cases back to the Court of Appeal. So that's one main thing. But the other main thing that's been generally ignored is the useless lawyers. The lawyers for the defence, the lawyers for the sub-postmasters who've gone to them and said, look, this is completely unfair. I did not steal money from the post office. The Horizon system is broken. For heaven's sakes, get this back to the Court of Appeal. How many lawyers managed to do so? Very, very few. What about the vast majority of lawyers who simply did not do their job? It's a very important area and one that needs close and rapid examining. Okay, so what is my not only the post office, NOTPO, crusade about? Well, basically, I'm just suggesting that we should do what Alan Bates did with the sub-postmasters, which was get a dozen or so of them together to all guarantee to each other that they were not the only person who made a complaint, which the post office told them they were, and that there were very valid reasons for their convictions to be considered unsafe, and that the CCRC should look at those convictions and they should make a fuss about it. Well, many, many more people have ended up in prison or convicted of crimes that are linked to the sexual abuse area the historical area of allegations about sexual abuse that are either totally false or exaggerated. Somebody who once was embraced by a teacher and congratulating them passing their exams, 40 years later accuses them of rape, and the teacher is convicted and is now in prison. All of those various assorted false allegations that have turned into wrongful convictions, and indeed many of the convictions that are unfair because they're convictions that are on vast exaggerations and shouldn't have ended up as they did. These need looking at, and I'm suggesting we have another gathering like Mr. Bates had with the Post Office submasters somewhere in central Great Britain that people can attend literally for just 3 or 4 hours with coffee, tea, soft drinks and sandwiches provided, to make a very short statement about how this had ruined their lives, ruined the lives of those around them, their relatives, families, indeed killed some people, and actually should be looked at and should be changed. And my way of suggesting there should be change is by disrupting the next general election, that people should refuse to vote unless a candidate has guaranteed it will be one of their priorities in the first year of becoming a member of Parliament to change the judicial system in 5 or 6 ways.
Queens that ever lived, I choose you to rule me, my Rosemary. Rosemary, I love you. I'm always dreaming of you. No matter what I do, I can't forget you. Sometimes I wish that I never met you. And yet, if I should lose you, would mean my very life to me. Of all the queens that ever lived, I choose you to rule me, yeah, to rule me. Of all the queens that ever lived, I choose you to rule me, my Rosemary. Of all the queens that ever lived, 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 I choose you to rule me, oh yeah, to rule me. Of all the queens that ever lived, I choose you to rule me, my Rosemary.
Laugh at that clip. It always makes me laugh. Right, here I am having breakfast with my friends Alex and Georgia, who actually want to say they've never met me, they don't like me, and they're not my friends.
We watched Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and it was just horrifying, wasn't it? Like really bleak.
Yeah, it was pretty sad. Just kind of ruined people's lives, and just like ordinary people doing their jobs.
Yeah, I think there was something like 800 miscarriages of justice. That still, like a lot of them, the convictions have been waiting. Yeah, really terrible.
Actually, their reason for coming up to town from Bath, which is where they live, was for me to take them to see the new smash hit success in the West End, which is called Stranger Things. And I have to say, it is absolutely spectacular, with incredible effects, really good use of sound, great sets. It's well worth going to. After watching the Stranger Things musical, Alex was taking Georgia along to see Les Miserables, which she'd never seen. I warned her that the moment in the second act for Bring Him Home is absolutely stunning. I've been binge watching Stranger Things on Netflix for the last few days. I've only actually seen the first 2 series, but they are very good. But I wanted to catch up on it before going to see the stage play, which, as I said, is spectacular and completely sold out. The 3 tickets for me, Alex and Georgia ended up costing me, I think, about 450 quid. But it was well worth going to, with one major problem for me. These days, I'm so deaf, I really can't hear a word. Sadly, even with my wonderful new NHS hearing aids, which give me direction and volume, I'm still unable to hear the clarity of dialogue on live stage theatrical performances. So it appears that it's cinemas only. I can still go to shows and enjoy the spectacular effects and the sound effects, the reactions of the crowd and everything else, but I just can't hear the dialogue clearly anymore. I'm afraid it's one of the hazards of old age. An ancient deaf Jonathan says, see you next episode.